How do you uncover the truth when every photo frame lies? I never questioned the silence. It was the background music of my childhood. Soft, constant, and unbroken. Our house was the kind that made no sound even when you dropped something. As if the walls had ears and the furniture held secrets. Growing up, I believed we were just a quiet family. My mother moved like a shadow. My father spoke only when absolutely necessary, and I learned early on to mirror their restraint. Stillness was safer, laughter was rare, and the past? Off limits. We lived in a modest two-story home at the end of a cul-de-sac lined with manicured hedges and symmetrical mailboxes. Nothing about our neighborhood hinted at mystery, but behind our closed door, there was a tension so thick it pulsed through the air. The house had a smell I can still recall. Lemons, dust, and something else, something faint and metallic, like an old coin that never quite loses its scent. I remember the attic most vividly. My parents kept it locked, the key tucked away somewhere I was never supposed to find. I asked once what was up there, and my mother said it was just old junk. The kind of junk that didn't deserve to see the light of day. She said it without looking at me. That should have told me everything. I wasn't supposed to go up there. But when my parents left for a week-long church retreat the summer I turned 24, I found the key inside a hollowed-out Bible. The irony wasn't lost on me. I climbed up, flashlight in hand, heart racing. The air in the attic was heavy, almost sentient. Dust floated like suspended memories. I scanned the space, expecting nothing more than forgotten boxes and discarded furniture. But then I saw it. An old leather suitcase, burgundy, scuffed, locked with a rusted latch. And beneath it, a stack of journals wrapped in a faded baby blanket. My hands trembled as I touched them. They belonged to someone named Rose. I had never heard the name before. I opened the first journal. The handwriting was elegant, swirling, almost romantic. And the first sentence changed everything I thought I knew about my life. It said, "I held my daughter for only 3 minutes before they took her away." I froze. Daughter? It didn't make sense. I was an only child. There was no sister, no mention of another child. My parents had never spoken of anyone else. I kept reading, unable to stop. The entries were dated from the early 90s. They told the story of a woman who had fallen in love, gotten pregnant, and been forced to give up her baby. The entries were raw, filled with grief and longing. She wrote of watching from a distance, of birthdays missed, of lullabies hummed alone in the dark. And with every page, a strange sensation grew in my chest, like grief that wasn't mine, but somehow lived inside me. Was Rose my mother, or someone my mother knew? And who was the baby? I needed answers. But the suitcase was locked tight, and I didn't dare force it open yet. I needed time. Time to absorb what I'd just read. Time to understand. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the words over and over. I held my daughter for only 3 minutes. 3 minutes. That was all she had. And whoever she was, she'd spent the rest of her life mourning those minutes. The next morning, I went back into the attic, determined to read every journal, to piece together whatever story had been buried above my head all these years. And that's when I found the photo, folded into one of the journals. Old, creased, but unmistakably my mother. But she was holding a baby, and it wasn't me. The baby in the photo had dark curls and a tiny birthmark just below her left eye. I touched the image, stunned. My mother's face was younger, softer, but her expression gave nothing away. She looked almost resigned, not sad, not joyful, just distant, like her heart was somewhere else entirely. I flipped the photo. Written on the back in faint pencil, October 1991. Her name is Clara. I stared at it, the name echoing in my mind like a melody I didn't know I knew. Clara. I had never heard that name spoken in our home. Never seen a single trace of a child other than me.
No toys, no clothes.
No photos. Just the quiet, eerie kind of absence that hides something too painful to say aloud. As I read deeper into the journals, a terrible timeline began to take shape. Rose had given birth to Clara. She had begged to keep her, but someone, her parents maybe, had arranged for the baby to be taken. The journal entries suggested some sort of private adoption, maybe even illegal. She had been told it was for the best, that she was too young, that the baby deserved better. But Rose hadn't agreed. She'd loved that child, desperately. Over time, her words changed. The grief hardened into anger, then quiet resolve. She wrote about trying to track Clara down, about letters she never sent, about the pain of watching other mothers hold their babies while hers existed only in memory. One entry stood out. They say grief dulls. They lie. It just changes shape. Now it's the smile I fake when people ask if I have children. I closed the journal, overwhelmed. My hands were still shaking. Was Clara alive? Did she know? And most importantly, who exactly was Rose? Because the more I read, the more her words felt familiar. The cadence, the phrasing, there was something about them that stirred something in me, like I had heard them before, or maybe even said them. I needed to talk to my parents, but something told me they wouldn't give me the truth. Not easily. Not after keeping this hidden for so long. So I made a choice. I wouldn't confront them until I knew exactly what I was asking. I had to find Clara, even if it meant unraveling everything I thought I knew about my family. Especially then. Finding Clara wasn't going to be easy. All I had was a name, a date, and a photo. But I had something stronger, an obsession. From the moment I saw her face, something inside me locked onto her image and refused to let go. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't just curiosity. Felt like duty. The journals became my anchor. I pored over every line, mapping out locations, names, even doctor's appointments mentioned in passing. Rose had kept everything. Receipts, ultrasound images, even scraps of paper with phone numbers scribbled on them. Some were so faded they were nearly illegible. But I read them all. I found an address in one entry. Dr. Lynn Carter, 227 Maple Grove Lane. The journal called her the only one who cared. I searched for the name online. A retired OBGYN, still living in the same house according to the public directory. A week later, I was standing on her doorstep, heart pounding, palms sweating. I didn't know what I would say, or even if she would remember. But when she opened the door, her expression shifted instantly. She didn't say a word. She just stepped aside and let me in. Her living room smelled like lavender and old paper. Dozens of porcelain angels lined the shelves. We sat in silence for a moment before she said, "You look like her." I didn't need to ask who she meant. Dr. Carter remembered Rose. She said she was a teenager when she came in, terrified but determined to keep the child. She told me how Rose had begged, how she'd pleaded with her parents not to send her away. But it was no use. The arrangements had been made long before the baby was born. The baby, Clara, had been placed with a couple from another state. No official records remained, just whispers and handshakes and envelopes full of cash. Dr. Carter had tried to follow up, but the trail vanished quickly. She never saw Rose again. Before I left, she handed me a folder. Inside were copies of the original paperwork. It wasn't much, but it included the adoptive parent's last name, Langford, and a town in Pennsylvania. My next destination. Driving there felt like crossing into another version of reality. Everything looked the same. Trees, gas stations, road signs, but I was different. The suitcase from the attic sat in my trunk like a sleeping giant, waiting for the right moment to be opened. The Langfords lived in a house that looked like it belonged in a postcard. Red shutters, flower boxes, a swing hanging from a sturdy oak tree. I parked across the street and watched. A woman came out. She looked to be in her early 30s. She had dark curls, and under her left eye, a faint birthmark. My breath caught in my throat. It was her, Clara. I didn't go to her. Not then. Couldn't. What would I say? That I found her in a stack of journals? That our lives were tangled in secrets we didn't ask for? Instead, I stayed in the car watching. She was laughing, carrying a grocery bag. She looked happy, whole. I didn't want to shatter that, but I also couldn't stay silent. Back at my hotel, I wrote her a letter. I told her what I had found, about Rose, about the journals, about the photo. I didn't sign my name. I just wrote, "If you want the truth, meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Bluebird Cafe." I left it in her mailbox and prayed she would come. That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing her face, seeing Rose's handwriting, hearing the soft creak of the attic floorboards. The past was alive again, and it was knocking at the door. At 9:58 the next morning, I sat at the Bluebird Cafe, heart pounding with every tick of the clock. The cafe was small, intimate, the kind of place where every arrival turned heads. I kept my eyes on the door. At exactly 10:02, she walked in. She scanned the room, eyes landing on me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she came over, sat down and said, "Start talking." So I did. I told her everything. About the attic, about the journals, about the name Rose, about the suitcase I still hadn't opened. I showed her the photo. She stared at it for a long time, tracing the edges with her fingers like she was afraid it might disappear. She said she always felt unrooted. Her parents were loving, but there was always a silence around her beginnings. She asked questions and they gave half answers. She never pushed too hard. Until now. I asked her if she wanted to see the journals. She nodded. So we drove back to my hotel. She sat on the edge of the bed, reading for hours. Sometimes she'd stop, close her eyes, and just breathe. When she finished, she looked at me and whispered, "She loved me." It wasn't a question. It was a revelation. That night, we opened the suitcase together. Inside were baby clothes, a rattle, more photos, a bracelet with tiny beads spelling out the name Clara. And at the very bottom, a letter, addressed to my mother, from Rose. The envelope was thin, the paper inside worn at the folds. Clara and I sat in silence as I carefully pulled the letter out. The handwriting matched the journals. Every swirl and loop of the pen felt haunted by memory. My hands trembled as I read aloud. To Eleanor, "I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if you even kept the suitcase. But I had to try. I had to believe that a piece of me might survive through you. You were there the day they took her. You held my hand. You said nothing, but your silence screamed. I begged them to let me keep her, but your eyes said everything. It was already decided. I didn't hate you then. I don't hate you now. I just want you to know that I remember. Her name is Clara. She had the softest skin and the darkest curls. She barely cried, just stared at me like she already knew we didn't have much time. I rocked her. I sang to her. And when they took her, I screamed so loud they had to sedate me. You stood in the doorway the whole time. Did you ever wonder what happened to her? Did you even think of me? This letter isn't to blame you. It's to remind you that I was real, that she was real, and that love doesn't vanish just because you're told to forget. I hope she's happy. I hope someone loved her like I did. I hope you found peace. But I never did. Rose. Clara sat frozen, her face unreadable. I watched her lips form the name Eleanor silently over and over again. Then she looked at me and said, "That's your mother, isn't it?" I nodded. I had never heard her called Eleanor before. To me, she was always just Mom. Cold, distant, rigid. But now a different picture was forming. One where she wasn't just my mother. She was part of something far more complicated. That night, Clara and I sat with the suitcase open on the floor between us. We didn't speak much. We just looked. At the bracelet, at the photos, at the ghost of a life neither of us had fully known. In the morning, Clara made a decision. She was going to confront her adoptive parents. She asked me to come with her. The Langfords were shocked to see her, but not surprised. The way her adoptive mother's hands trembled gave it away before a word was spoken. Clara didn't accuse. She just asked, "Who arranged the adoption? Was it legal? Did they know Rose?" The answers came slowly, carefully. Her adoptive father admitted it had been handled privately, that a friend of the family had taken care of it. No paperwork had passed through official channels. They had been told the mother wanted no contact. Lies, of course, but lies told so often, they had become their truth. Clara didn't cry. She thanked them for their honesty, then walked out. In the car, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I don't think I've ever belonged to anyone. Not really." I wanted to tell her she did. That Rose had never stopped loving her. That even now she had me. But I knew those words wouldn't be enough. Not yet. We went back to my place and reread the journals again. We sat until the sun set, and then we started organizing everything. Creating a timeline, trying to piece together what had happened. There were still questions. Why had my mother been involved? Had she and Rose been close? And why had this secret been buried so deeply? There was only one person left to ask. My mother. And I was finally ready to do it. Clara held my hand as I knocked on the door. When it opened, and my mother saw her, she went pale. She didn't speak. She just stepped back, letting us in. The silence was thunderous. It was time for the truth to come out. We sat in the living room where I had spent most of my childhood. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt familiar. The couch still had the same scratch on the armrest, the same crocheted blanket draped over the back. But the air was different, heavier, as though the house itself knew we were about to shake its very foundations. My mother, Eleanor, sat opposite us, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Clara and I said nothing at first. We just waited. Eventually, my mother exhaled. Not a sigh, not a gasp. Something deeper, like the breath someone takes before confession. She said she met Rose when they were teenagers. Rose was the wild one, the beautiful one, the one who lit up every room. My mother admired her, envied her, and then, unexpectedly, they became friends. It wasn't the kind of friendship that was loud or obvious. It was quiet, almost secret. My mother said she never understood why Rose liked her. But Rose did. She trusted her. She shared everything. When Rose got pregnant, everything changed. Her parents were furious, threatened to send her away. My mother tried to help. She pleaded with them. She offered to help raise the child. But no one listened. The day Clara was born, my mother was there. She held Rose's hand. She stood in the doorway when they took the baby. And when Rose screamed, my mother turned her back. Not because she wanted to, but because she was told to, by her own parents. Clara and I sat in stunned silence. All these years, our lives had been shaped by decisions made behind closed doors, by people too afraid to do what was right. My mother said she never forgave herself, that she thought about Rose every day, that she kept the suitcase as punishment, a reminder. I asked her why she never told me. She said because the truth would break everything, and because some stories felt too heavy to share. Clara asked her one question. "Do you think she hated you?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered. "I think she trusted me, and I failed her." For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was sacred. Then Clara stood, walked to my mother, and hugged her. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something. A beginning. Later that night, I found my mother in the kitchen, staring at a photo on the fridge. It was one of me as a child, smiling, unaware. She turned to me and asked, "What will you do now?" I told her the truth. We were going to find Rose, because something in me refused to believe she was gone. I had no proof she was alive, but the journals ended abruptly.
No goodbye.
No final entry, just blank pages. And I couldn't shake the feeling that Rose had left them that way for a reason, like she was still out there, waiting to be found, by the daughter she lost, and the son who never knew she existed. Tracking down Rose was like chasing a shadow. Every lead brought more questions than answers. She had vanished from public records sometime around 1998. No forwarding address, no online footprint. It was like she had been swallowed whole by the past. But we had one advantage, the journals. Rose had been meticulous, even in her heartbreak. There were names, old friends, addresses half-scribbled in the margins. Clara and I began the slow process of reaching out to them. Most never responded. Some numbers were disconnected. But one, a woman named Margaret Dalton, picked up. Her voice was cautious at first, but when I mentioned Rose, everything shifted. She told us Rose had moved in with her for a while after giving up Clara. She was quiet, broken, but determined to rebuild. She stayed for a year, then left suddenly.
No goodbye.
Just a note. Margaret still had it. We drove 6 hours to meet her. She lived in a cottage by a lake, surrounded by pine trees and silence. Margaret was in her 60s now, hair silver and eyes sharp with memory. She greeted us like we were family. Maybe in her mind we were. She handed us the note, yellowed and delicate. I'm going where no one knows me. Maybe I can become someone else. Someone who doesn't cry every night. Thank you for giving me a safe place to grieve. I'll never forget it. The postmark was from a small town in Oregon. A week later, we were there. The town was quiet, nestled in a valley, surrounded by mist-covered hills. Everyone seemed to know each other. We showed the photo of Rose to gas station attendants, waitresses, shopkeepers. Most shook their heads, until one woman squinted at the image and said, "She looks a lot like the woman who used to run the bookstore." Used to. Those words landed like a weight. The bookstore had closed 3 years ago, but the building still stood. Dusty windows, faded sign, door locked. We peered inside, but saw only shadows. The town library gave us a lead. The woman's name had been changed. She went by Rachel then. Lived in a small cabin outside town. No phone, no social media. The librarian offered to drive us there. The road twisted through thick forest, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The cabin was tucked away, almost invisible among the trees. We stepped out, hearts pounding. I knocked. No answer. Again. Nothing. I peered through a window. Dust. Empty bookshelves. A mug still on the table. Someone had lived here, but now it was abandoned. Clara stepped onto the porch, holding something in her hand. A key. It was under a stone by the steps. We hesitated, then unlocked the door. The air inside was still, cold, but not dead, like whoever had been here hadn't left that long ago. On the wall, a framed photo. It was Rose, older, but unmistakably her. Standing by a river, arms crossed, hair streaked with gray. She looked peaceful. At last, we found journals in the back room. Newer ones. Same handwriting, but different tone. Calmer. The last entry was dated just 2 months earlier. I dreamt of her again last night. Clara. She was laughing. I hope she's happy. Maybe that's enough for me. We weren't sure what to feel. She had been here. Alive. Writing. Remembering. But now she was gone again. Or was she? We stayed in the cabin that night. Neither of us wanted to leave. It felt like Rose was still there. Her presence woven into every book spine and dust-covered window pane. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt like her. We read through every page of the new journals. The entries were shorter now, softer, like Rose had made peace with her ghosts. Even if she could never forget them. She wrote about the forest, how the seasons changed, how birds came and went. But always, in every volume, there was Clara. Her memory, her name, always returning like a refrain. Sometimes she would write just a single line. Clara would be 30 now. Or, I saw a little girl today with dark curls and a birthmark. I almost cried. There was one entry that stood out. If she ever finds me, I won't run. Promise. I'll look her in the eye and tell her everything. I'll let her hate me. I'll let her love me. Whatever she needs, I will be. That line became our mission. Clara was quiet for a long time after reading it. Then she said, "We need to keep looking. She's not hiding from me. Not anymore." We searched the cabin for any sign of where Rose had gone. The pantry was half-stocked. Clothes still hung in the closet. Her toothbrush was still by the sink. Then we found the receipt, tucked into one of the journals, dated just 10 days earlier. A purchase from a small co-op store in a nearby town, Blanket River. We packed up and drove there the next morning. Blanket River was barely a dot on the map. One main street, a diner, a hardware store, a post office the size of a garden shed. We walked into the co-op, photo in hand. The cashier nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's Rachel. Comes in every couple of weeks. Quiet lady. Buys tea, birdseed, those almond cookies no one else touches." Is she here now? I asked. The cashier shook his head. Haven't seen her this week. We left a note. We wrote her name, Clara, on the outside, and inside just one sentence. We found you. We're ready whenever you are. And a number. Then we waited. Days passed. We stayed in a motel on the edge of town. Every morning we checked with the co-op. Nothing. On the 5th day our phone rang. It was her. Her voice was soft, fragile but steady. She didn't say much, just asked if we'd meet her, gave us an address, a time. We drove in silence. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in rose and gold. The meeting place was a park overlooking a lake. A single bench beneath an old oak tree. She was already there when we arrived. Rose. She stood when she saw us. And when Clara took her first step forward, Rose did too. They met halfway. No words, just an embrace. Years of silence collapsing into a single moment. I stayed back, watching, knowing this wasn't my scene. Not yet. This was theirs. Mother, daughter, reunited at last. They sat on that bench for hours side by side, saying very little. But everything they needed to say passed between them in the spaces between words. In the way Rose reached out to brush Clara's hair from her face. In the way Clara leaned into her without even realizing it. When they finally walked back to the car, something had changed. Not everything, not the past, but something. A weight had shifted. Back at the motel, Rose joined us for tea. She looked older than in the photo we had found, but there was still something youthful in her eyes. Something resilient. She told us everything. The years of grief. The time spent trying to move on. The day she saw Clara from a distance in a park when she was just a toddler, before she knew it was too risky to be nearby. The ache that never left. She said she had written dozens of letters she never sent. That she had planned 100 times to find Clara. But something always stopped her. Fear. Shame. The belief that maybe Clara was better off not knowing. I was wrong, she said quietly. You deserved to know everything. Clara reached across the table and took her hand.
No judgment.
Just connection. I watched them and felt a strange pang. Gratitude and grief mixed into one. I wasn't part of their beginning, but I was part of the healing. That mattered. Rose asked about my mother, Eleanor. I told her the truth, that she still carried the guilt, that she never forgot. Rose nodded slowly. We were just kids, she whispered. All of us, doing what we thought we had to do. We stayed in Blanket River for a week. Rose showed us her favorite hiking trail, the coffee shop with the cinnamon rolls she loved, the hill where she watched the stars when she couldn't sleep. Clara asked her every question she had kept buried for decades. Rose answered each one with honesty, even when it hurt. One night, as we sat under the stars, Clara asked if she could visit again. Rose smiled. This time, don't wait 30 years. It became a rhythm. Letters, phone calls, visits. Slowly, something that had once been shattered began to piece itself back together. And me? I began to understand that family isn't always what you're born into. Sometimes it's what you uncover, what you choose. I thought the story was over, that the secrets had all been revealed. But the past wasn't finished with us yet. Because one day, as Rose was going through an old box in her cabin, she found something she had forgotten even existed. A birth certificate. But it wasn't Clara's. It was mine. The paper was brittle. The edges curled like they were trying to hide themselves. Rose held it in both hands, squinting under the dim light. Her brow furrowed. Then her eyes widened. She looked at me slowly, like I had just changed shape before her eyes. I took the certificate from her. My name was there. My birthday. But the mother's name, it wasn't Eleanor. It was Rose. Silence. Total. Then the rush of 1,000 thoughts hitting me all at once. I sat down. My hands went numb. The room felt smaller. Rose whispered, almost to herself, "This can't be right." But it was. We double-checked. Compared dates, names, addresses from her journals. It all lined up. Rose had given birth twice. Once to Clara, and once to me. My voice cracked when I asked, "Why didn't you remember?" She looked at me, tears in her eyes. I didn't forget. I was never told you survived. I couldn't make sense of it. My whole life I had believed Eleanor was my mother. She raised me, clothed me, fed me, even if she did so from a distance. But Rose had carried me, given birth to me, lost me. She pulled out another journal, one I hadn't seen. It had been hidden at the bottom of the box. The cover was different, newer, untouched. Inside, entries started just after Clara was taken. But they were brief, disjointed, fragmented. One entry read, "They took the second one too. A boy. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to believe it could happen again." Another, "They said he didn't make it. But I didn't see him. I didn't get to hold him. Just a nurse's voice. Just a closed door." I felt like I was dissolving, like I was floating above the scene, watching someone else live my life. Clara sat beside me, silent. Rose couldn't stop crying. All those years I had spent searching for truth. For Clara. For Rose. I never imagined I was part of the secret too. That I was the other child lost in the shuffle of shame and silence. We confronted Eleanor. She didn't deny it. She had been told Rose was unstable. That the baby had been abandoned. That no one wanted me. So she took me in. Raised me as her own. She thought she was saving me. Protecting me from the truth. But it was a truth I had every right to know. I asked her why she didn't tell me when I found Clara's journals. She said she couldn't bear to lose me. But I was never hers to lose. The months that followed were a blur. Therapy. Letters. Nights spent reading Rose's words until they became part of my own voice. Clara and I grew closer. We called Rose every day. And slowly the pieces settled. I forgave Eleanor, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to move forward. Rose and I began again. As mother and son. As strangers learning to love each other. And Clara, my sister, stood by us, the bridge that made us whole. The past had tried to bury us. But we had unearthed it. Together. The strange how life reshapes itself around the truth. Like a river carving a new path through rock. At first, everything resists. But eventually it flows. And something beautiful takes shape where there once was only confusion. Rose moved back east a few months after the revelation. We helped her find a small place near Clara's. It wasn't much. Just a one-bedroom with a tiny porch and creaky floors. But it was hers. And it was near us. We began rebuilding, not just as individuals but as a family. There were awkward dinners, long silences, moments where the past reached up and wrapped its fingers around our throats. But there was laughter, too. New memories that grew roots. I found myself calling Rose Mom for the first time on a quiet afternoon. I hadn't planned to. The word just came. She didn't cry, but I saw the way her fingers tightened around her teacup, like she needed something to hold on to. Clara started journaling. She said it helped her understand Rose better. She wanted to write her own story, not just read the ones we had uncovered. As for me, I left my job. I started working with kids in the foster system. Something about giving them stability, helping them find a truth of their own, felt like healing in motion. One day, I asked Rose if she ever thought things would turn out this way. She smiled sadly. I stopped dreaming a long time ago, but if I had, I think it would have looked something like this. There were still hard days, triggers, regrets, but the weight wasn't as heavy with all of us carrying it together. Then, on a cold January morning, Rose didn't answer her phone. We found her in her chair by the window, journal in her lap, blanket over her knees. Peaceful. Gone. The grief that followed wasn't sharp. It was soft, like a wave that takes you under but leaves you gently on the shore. She had written one final entry. I have nothing left to fear. They found me. They saw me. And they forgave me. At her funeral, Clara read from the first journal. I read from the last. We buried her with the suitcase. And the bracelet. And a letter Clara had written the night before. Said simply, "You were always enough." We visit her grave sometimes. Bring tea. Talk like she's still listening. Maybe she is. Maybe she always will be. Some stories don't end. They echo. It's been 2 years since Rose passed. Time has softened the edges of our grief but not erased it. I think grief lives on in the quiet moments. The way Clara looks at old photos. The way I pause before writing her name, unsure whether to use the present or the past tense. Clara and I started a foundation in Rose's name. We help young mothers in crisis, offer them support, shelter, a voice when no one else will listen. It's our way of keeping Rose's story alive, of rewriting the ending for someone else. Sometimes I still visit the cabin in Oregon. It's still standing, though the woods have crept closer, like nature wants to take it back. Inside, we left everything the way it was. The journals, the mugs, the sense of her. I sit in her chair and read her words. They don't make me cry anymore. They make me feel held. We've shared her story with others. Not all of it, just enough to help people understand what silence can do, what love can endure, what truth can restore. People always ask me how I found the strength to go looking. I tell them it wasn't strength. It was longing and faith that somewhere, beneath the lies and the pain, something true remained. I used to think my story started in a quiet house with lemon-scented dust and locked attic doors. Now I know it started long before that, with a girl named Rose, who loved too deeply, who lost too much, and who never stopped waiting to be found. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs it. Let's make sure no one else has to grow up surrounded by silence.